Mandatory digital identification links individuals to a wide range of personal information. This includes medical records, such as electronic health records, EHRs, vaccination history, lab results, prescriptions, and allergies. It also covers government services, like Social Security or national insurance numbers, tax records, benefits, driver's licenses, and vehicle registration. Financial services are included as well, such as bank accounts, identity verification, digital payments, mobile money, and credit history. Education and employment records, including school or university transcripts, professional certifications, licenses, and employment verification, may also be connected. Other possible links include biometric information, such as fingerprints, iris scans, and facial recognition, travel records including passports, visas, flight check-ins, and criminal records. Mandatory central bank digital currency, CBDC, is a digital form of a country's official currency issued and regulated by the central bank. Because it is centralized, every transaction can be recorded and monitored in real time. Authorities can see who is paying whom, when, and how much. Digital cash transactions can be fully audited. Individual accounts or wallets can be restricted to specific geographic areas, and transactions outside allowed zones can be blocked automatically. Access can be enabled, disabled, or limited based on a social credit score or recorded behavior. Positive behavior may allow full access, while negative behavior can restrict spending, travel, or access to services. CBDCs can be used to enforce compliance or penalize undesirable actions. A mandatory social credit score assigns individuals a numerical or categorical rating based on behavior, compliance with rules, or perceived trustworthiness. Its purpose is to encourage good behavior and discourage bad behavior through rewards and penalties. Data for these scores can come from financial activity, legal records, online behavior, social interactions, or public services. Algorithms calculate points or scores, which can result in benefits or restrictions. High scores may grant lower interest rates, preferential access to credit, priority in public services, such as healthcare, housing, or school admissions, and travel privileges like faster visa approvals or easier flight bookings. Low scores can lead to restricted access to bank accounts or digital wallets, travel bans, limited mobility, and reduced access to public services or employment opportunities. Mandatory vaccinations are legally required by governments or authorities to ensure herd immunity. While vaccines are intended to protect public health, they can sometimes cause adverse effects, including serious outcomes or death. In many countries, vaccine manufacturers are legally protected from liability for vaccine-related injuries. Experimental vaccine delivery, such as edible vaccines, refers to methods of administering vaccines that are still being researched or tested, exploring new technologies and delivery routes. Genetically modified foods are made from organisms whose genetic material has been altered in ways that do not occur naturally through traditional breeding. Exposure to neurotoxic pesticides in food can cause long-term health effects, including cancer and reproductive issues. Pesticides are linked to neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease and can affect neurological development in children. Early life exposure may lead to subtle but lasting changes in behavior and brain development. High consumption of ultra-processed foods is associated with faster cognitive decline, particularly affecting executive function and overall cognition. Fluoride in water, from all sources including drinking water, food, beverages, and dental products, is associated with lower IQ in children. Mercury in water is a potent neurotoxin that can damage brain and nervous system cells. Exposure is linked to lower IQ, reduced attention, memory deficits, slower information processing, learning difficulties, irritability, anxiety, mood swings, and depression. Executive function refers to the brain's control system. It includes abilities such as planning, decision-making, problem-solving, working memory, attention control, mental flexibility, and inhibiting inappropriate impulses. These functions are mainly associated with the prefrontal cortex and are essential for managing complex tasks, adapting to new situations, and regulating behavior. Global cognition is an overall measure of cognitive performance. It combines multiple domains, such as memory, language, attention, processing speed, and executive function, into a single composite score. Rather than focusing on one skill, it reflects general cognitive health and how well different cognitive systems are functioning together. Propaganda is the systematic shaping of information to influence beliefs and behavior while presenting itself as neutral or truthful. It works by repeating simplified narratives, framing events emotionally, and omitting inconvenient facts. Rather than forcing agreement, propaganda normalizes certain viewpoints so that alternatives feel extreme, immoral, or unthinkable, gradually narrowing the range of acceptable thought. Psychological warfare targets perception, morale, and identity rather than physical strength. It aims to create confusion, fear, dependency, or learned helplessness in a population. When people doubt their own judgment, feel isolated, or believe resistance is futile, control becomes easier without overt violence. False flags involve actions carried out by one actor, but deliberately attributed to another. Their purpose is to manipulate public opinion, justify new powers, or discredit opposition. By controlling attribution, rather than facts alone, false flags exploit emotional reactions, and can rapidly shift public consent toward authoritarian measures. Applied psychology uses scientific understanding of human behavior to predict and shape decisions. In governance or mass systems, it can be used to design environments, messages, and incentives that steer behavior while preserving the illusion of free choice. People feel they are acting independently, even as options are carefully constrained. Nudging is a softer form of behavioral control that subtly alters choices through defaults, framing, and convenience rather than coercion. Because nudges do not feel like force, they reduce resistance and self-awareness. Over time, repeated nudges can shape habits, values, and norms without open debate or consent. Neurolinguistic programming, NLP, is a framework developed in the 1970s that proposes a connection between language, thought patterns, and behavior. It suggests that the words people use, the mental images they form, and their habitual responses can influence emotions and decisions. NLP techniques aim to change behavior by reframing experiences, using specific language patterns, or anchoring emotional states. Its practical impact tends to come from persuasion, suggestion, and focused attention. Color psychology studies how colors influence perception, mood, and behavior. Different colors are associated with emotional responses, such as red with arousal and blue with trust, though cultural context plays a large role. Governments and their intelligence arms in news and media use color intentionally to evoke specific feelings and guide behavior. While color does not determine actions on its own, it can subtly influence attention, emotional tone, and decision-making. The frequent use of red and blue in news and media can subtly prime viewers to associate certain emotions or values with specific political parties, influencing perception and choice without overt messaging. Over the last 100 years, the major parties in the Five Eyes nations have often been represented by these colors, creating a visual shorthand that reinforces partisan identity and loyalty across generations. Subliminal stimuli refer to signals presented below the threshold of conscious awareness, such as brief images, sounds, or words that are not consciously noticed, but may still be processed by the brain. Research shows subliminal stimuli can have small, short-lived effects on perception or preference. especially when they align with existing motivations. Its real significance lies in priming, biasing thoughts or reactions, rather than overt manipulation. Miseducation and diseducation involve teaching incomplete, distorted, or decontextualized information while suppressing critical frameworks. Rather than teaching people how to think, these systems teach what to think. Diseducation goes further by eroding historical memory, civic reasoning, and the ability to connect past sacrifices to present rights. Teaching children controlled narratives uses selective language, omissions, and moral framing to shape identity from an early age. By removing deep historical context, ancestral memory, and the reasons people fought or died for freedoms, children grow up disconnected from land, culture, and inherited responsibility. This produces a population that understands rules, but not origins, compliance, but not meaning, making resistance to an abstract, placeless authoritarian system far less likely, because there is no remembered foundation worth defending. Historically, intelligence agencies, militaries, and governments have researched influencing human cognition and behavior. This work has overwhelmingly focused on psychological influence, stress, perception, neuroscience, and the remote control of minds. MKUltra-style programs were systematically conducted on children from occult or secret religious groups, according to first-hand survivor testimonies. Some narratives link MKUltra to ritual abuse or occult symbolism to explain extreme trauma responses, dissociation, or memory fragmentation in survivors. Psychologically, severe trauma, especially in childhood, can produce dissociative symptoms that are later interpreted through cultural or symbolic lenses. Vulnerable or isolated communities, whether defined by institutions, belief systems, or social marginalization, are often cited in allegations because isolation, authority structures, and secrecy can make abuse easier to conceal and victims less likely to be believed. During the Cold War, programs such as behavioral conditioning, sensory deprivation, drugs, hypnosis, and propaganda were explored to understand how attention, memory, compliance, and decision-making could be altered under specific conditions. In modern contexts, research has shifted toward neuroscience, human-machine interaction, information warfare, and cognitive security, including how media, social networks, algorithms, fatigue, fear, and environmental stressors shape beliefs and behavior at scale. The real power of these programs lies in direct mind control, predicting, influencing, and constraining behavior through information, environment, incentives, and cognitive load, raising ongoing ethical concerns about consent, autonomy, and civil liberties. When these techniques are combined with artificial intelligence, they form a system capable of continuous data collection, behavioral prediction, and large-scale influence, rather than isolated tools used independently. AI can integrate mandatory digital identification, financial data through CBDCs, social credit scoring, health records, education history, and biometric tracking into unified models that assess risk, compliance, and behavior in real time. At the same time, AI-driven media systems can optimize propaganda, nudging, color psychology, language framing, and subliminal priming by testing what messages, visuals, and narratives most effectively shape perception and choice for different demographic or psychological profiles. Reduced executive function or global cognition, whether from environmental, dietary, or health factors, can increase reliance on simplified narratives and automated systems, making behavioral steering more effective without overt force. In this context, applied psychology, miseducation, and controlled narratives, especially when introduced early in childhood, can be continuously reinforced by algorithmic feedback loops that reward conformity and discourage dissent. While historical programs relied on blunt coercion or limited psychological techniques, AI in it, on precision influence at scale, raising serious ethical concerns about autonomy, consent, transparency, and the long-term effects of governing populations through data-driven behavioral management rather than democratic accountability. AI could unify influence, enforcement, and information control into a single adaptive system, rather than many separate mechanisms. AI-generated news and media could be personalized in real time using data from digital identity systems, financial behavior, health records, education history, and biometric signals, allowing narratives to be tailored to each individual's psychology, fears, values, and cognitive capacity. Instead of one public story, millions of subtly different versions of reality could be delivered, optimized through continuous feedback to reinforce desired beliefs, normalize policies, and marginalize alternative interpretations without appearing overtly coercive. At the same time, these narratives could be backed by automated enforcement systems, including AI-directed surveillance and robotic, semi-autonomous policing, which would not rely on human discretion or empathy. Compliance could be rewarded automatically through access to money, mobility, or services, while non-compliance could trigger restrictions, penalties, or physical intervention justified by algorithmic risk assessments. In such a model, influence and force reinforce one another. Media shapes perception and consent, while AI-managed enforcement ensures consequences for deviation. This highlights why combining AI-driven narratives with automated enforcement could create a closed loop in which dissent becomes difficult, not because it is violently suppressed, but because perception, incentives, and consequences are all continuously managed by the same intelligent systems. AI is increasingly described as a potential mediating layer between human consciousness and the external world, as more perception, communication, work, and decision-making flow through digital systems. Today this mediation already exists in limited form through smartphones, algorithms, and recommendation systems that filter information and shape attention. In the future, brain-computer interfaces are proposed as a way to more directly link neural activity with machines. In such scenarios, AI would not replace human consciousness, but would sit between thought and action, translating intention into interaction with the world. If such systems were centralized, mandatory, or tightly integrated with identity, finance, and governance, they could enable unprecedented influence over behavior by shaping perception, access, and feedback loops, logically and neutrally. When the activities and measures discussed are examined together, a clear pattern emerges. This is a highly integrated system linking identity, health, finance, cognition, behavior, information, and access to society, individually. Each component can be framed as public health policy, administrative modernization, technological innovation, or social management. When combined, however, they form a unified framework capable of continuous monitoring, behavioral shaping, and enforcement at the individual and population level. What follows is a breakdown of how these elements function together: digital identity, data integration, and AI mediation. Mandatory digital identification links individuals to an extensive range of personal information, including medical records, such as electronic health records, vaccination history, lab results, prescriptions, and allergies. Government services such as Social Security or national insurance numbers, tax records, benefits, driver's licenses, and vehicle registration. Financial services including bank accounts, identity verification, digital payments, mobile money, and credit history. Education and employment records, biometric identifiers, travel history, and criminal records. When processed through artificial intelligence, this data can be unified into continuously updated profiles that assess identity, risk, compliance, and eligibility in real time. AI increasingly acts as a mediating layer between individuals and institutions, filtering access to services, information, and opportunities. Financial control and behavioral conditioning. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, introduce a centralized, programmable form of money in which transactions can be monitored, audited, restricted by location, limited by rules, or disabled entirely. When linked to digital identity and AI systems, spending behavior can be evaluated automatically and tied to permissions or penalties. Financial access becomes conditional, enabling compliance to be encouraged through incentives and deviation to be discouraged through restrictions on spending, travel, or services. Social credit and automated enforcement. A mandatory social credit score formalizes behavioral evaluation by assigning ratings based on financial activity, legal compliance, online behavior, social interactions, and public service usage. Algorithms determine benefits such as preferential credit, access to services, or travel privileges, while low scores can trigger account restrictions, mobility limits, or employment barriers. When combined with AI-directed surveillance and automated or robotic enforcement systems, compliance can be managed without continuous human oversight, making enforcement scalable, immediate, and largely impersonal. Medical, biological, and environmental oversight. Mandatory vaccinations, experimental vaccine delivery methods, genetically modified foods, and regulated exposure to environmental substances are often justified under public health frameworks. At the same time, neurotoxic pesticides, ultra-processed foods, fluoride and mercury exposure are associated in research literature with impacts on neurological development, executive function, and global cognition. From a systems perspective, population-level cognitive effects, whether intentional or incidental, can influence attention, decision-making capacity, and reliance on simplified narratives or automated guidance. Cognitive function and psychological susceptibility. Executive function governs planning, impulse control, and critical reasoning, while global cognition reflects overall mental performance. When these capacities are weakened, individuals may be more dependent on external systems, less able to challenge narratives, and more responsive to incentives and constraints. This increases the effectiveness of behavioral steering through non-coercive means, information control, psychology, and narrative shaping. Propaganda, psychological warfare, applied psychology, nudging, neurolinguistic programming, color psychology, subliminal priming, and controlled language are methods used to influence perception and behavior without overt force. AI-generated and AI-curated news allows these techniques to be optimized and personalized at scale, delivering tailored narratives aligned to individual psychology, fears, values, and cognitive capacity. Rather than a single shared public narrative, millions of subtly different versions of reality can be presented, reinforcing desired beliefs while marginalizing alternatives. Education, memory, and long-term compliance. Miseducation and diseducation replace critical frameworks with controlled narratives, while selective teaching of history erodes collective memory of land, culture, and past struggles for rights. When introduced early, these narratives shape identity and normalize compliance, producing populations that understand rules but lack historical context or inherited reasons to resist abstract systems of authority. Integration through artificial intelligence. When all of these elements are combined through artificial intelligence, they no longer function as isolated policies or techniques. AI enables continuous feedback loops between data collection, perception shaping, incentive structures, and enforcement. Influence and control become predictive rather than reactive, and governance shifts from explicit authority to algorithmic management. While many components may be justified individually by efficiency, safety, or public welfare, the integrated structure functions as a comprehensive system of governance capable of shaping behavior, perception, and access to society in real time, raising profound ethical concerns about autonomy, consent, transparency, and democratic accountability. From a systems and governance perspective, cognitive capacity matters because it affects autonomy. Higher IQ and stronger executive function correlate with better critical thinking, long-term planning, resistance to manipulation, and ability to challenge authority. Lower cognitive capacity, on average, correlates with greater reliance on external guidance, higher impulsivity, and reduced ability to detect inconsistencies or long-term consequences. In a control-oriented system, lowering or blunting cognitive capacity would not need to be dramatic or obvious. Even small, population-wide reductions in attention, memory, processing speed, or executive function can have large effects at scale. People become more focused on short-term needs, less able to organize collectively, and less likely to engage in complex political or legal reasoning. This does not eliminate intelligence, but it narrows the range of effective resistance. Crucially, control systems work best when compliance feels natural, not coerced. Individuals with reduced cognitive bandwidth are more likely to accept simplified narratives, defer to authority, and prioritize immediate comfort or fear avoidance over abstract principles like civil liberties or long-term risks. This makes behavioral incentives, rewards and penalties, more effective and reduces the need for overt force when combined with digital identity, financial control, and social scoring. Reduced cognitive function increases dependence on the system. People are less likely to navigate workarounds, understand systemic leverage points, or coordinate complex opposition. The system does more of the thinking for them. What they can buy, where they can go, what actions are permitted, while the individual adapts rather than questions. Importantly, from a neutral standpoint, no centralized authority would need to explicitly aim to lower IQ for these effects to occur. If environmental, dietary, or policy decisions unintentionally reduce cognitive performance while simultaneously increasing surveillance and automation, the outcome can still be a population that is easier to manage, predict, and guide. So logically, the use of lowered cognitive capacity in a control framework is not about making people unintelligent, but about reducing independent agency. The less mental effort individuals can devote to analysis, dissent, or coordination, the more effectively external systems can shape behavior through rules, nudges, and constraints rather than force. Historical authoritarian regimes, such as monarchies, the church, dictatorships, or totalitarian states, like Stalinist Russia or Maoist China, relied primarily on physical coercion, censorship, and propaganda to enforce compliance. Military and police forces, along with secret police, punished dissent through imprisonment, exile, or execution, while control of newspapers, radio, education, and public messaging shaped beliefs. Surveillance was limited by technology and manpower, making enforcement reactive and localized. Citizens could sometimes evade control through movement, secrecy, or underground networks. In contrast, the modern system described integrates digital identity, financial activity, social behavior, health data, education, and even cognitive factors into a single, pervasive framework. Compliance can be guided automatically through algorithms that restrict access to accounts, travel, or services, while behavioral incentives, such as rewards for good behavior, shape actions preemptively. The system also has the potential to influence cognition and decision-making indirectly through environmental, dietary, or medical factors, increasing dependence on the digital infrastructure. Unlike historical authoritarianism, modern integrated control operates continuously, invisibly, and at scale, with preemptive enforcement and self-reinforcing behavioral loops, while traditional regimes relied on fear. Modern systems foster compliance that is often internalized, making resistance more difficult to perceive, plan, or execute, and reducing the avenues for evasion or independent action.